Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to do a second day in factoring, because factoring is hugely important to our math. Your objectives for the day are to practice more of the AC method problems. So those we're going to practice a few more that we did yesterday, and then we're going to review. It's called the difference of two squares. Right, so that's what we're going to do for your objectives. So we're going to practice, do a couple more problems with the AC method, and then we are going to do the difference of two squares, which is actually super simple. We like that one. Alright, so here's your first example. I want you to factor, and we're going to do x squared minus 3x minus 10. Okay. And I'm going to do the AC method. So my first thing is to do a times c, which is 1 times a negative 10, which is a negative 10. My factors of a negative 10 could be a negative 5 and a positive 2. That's a negative 10. And then if I do a negative 5 plus 2, I get a negative 3. Okay. The next step is to rewrite the middle term. So it's going to be x squared minus 5x plus 2x minus 10. Now I'm going to group my terms. I'm going to group the first two together, and then I'm going to group the second two together. Now I'm going to factor. I'm going to take an x out, and I get x minus 5. Then I'm going to take a 2 out, and I also get x minus 5. Okay? We're almost done. I'm going to factor one more time. I'm going to take out the x minus 5s, and I'm going to be left with x plus 2. And there is the answer to the first problem. Okay, now let's do another one. So let's do another example. And I want to factor. And I want to factor 5x squared minus 25x plus 30. Okay? One of the things that you should notice before we get started is that this is divisible by 5, this is divisible by 5, and so is the 30. So before we actually start doing the AC method, I'm going to factor out the 5. Okay, so I'm going to take out a common term. And that common term is 5. So it's going to be 5. And then I'm going to write x squared. 25 divided by 5 is 5x. And 30 divided by 5 is 6. Now the problem is significantly easier. So now I can do my AC method. I can't get rid of the 5. I have to carry it all the way until the very end. So now I'm going to do my AC. Remember, I'm doing my AC on the inside piece. Okay? So if I do my AC on the inside piece, I'm going to get 1 times 6, which is 6. And the factors of 6 that are going to add, they both have to have the same sign, and I need a negative 5. So I'm going to do a negative 2 and a negative 3. When I multiply those together, I get a positive 6. And if I add, I get a negative 5. Now I'm going to rewrite, and I'm still carrying that 5 around. Okay, so it's going to be x squared minus 2x minus 3x plus 6. Then I'm going to group, and I'm still carrying that 5. I'm going to do, x squared minus 2x, and then add my plus minus 3x plus 6. Okay. Now I'm going to factor. On the inside, I'm just going to manage the inside. I'm going to do x times x minus 2, and I'm going to take out a negative 3 to get x minus 2. Okay? Notice we're still carrying forward our 5. So now I'm going to factor again. Here's the 5, and I'm going to have x minus 2. I'm left with an x minus 3, and then I'm just going to rewrite that a little bit to be x minus 2 and x minus 3, and there's my answer. So the AC method is actually a really nice method. It makes the math seem simpler than trying to pull off guessing and testing what it would have been from our original equation. Alright, so now it's time to pause. Do your first problem. So get the paper scooted back over. So this is your first problem. This is problem 1. So once I get it written, you're going to want to pause the video and do the first problem. And it says to factor 5x squared minus 2x minus 6 is equal to a negative 3x squared plus 6x. Before you start, you might want to take these two terms over to this side of the equation, being careful with your signs, and then you can start factoring. So you need to manage these two terms first, and then you can factor. Your other hint, so your first hint is to combine like terms, being careful with your signs. So careful with your signs. And then you're going to probably want to factor out a common term before you actually, that's supposed to be an M, before you start. Then you can do your factoring. Okay? Alright, so you're going to combine like terms, factor out a common term, and then you can do, that says AC factoring. Sorry, it got a little small. Alright, so there's your first problem. Now we're going to do a different method. And this one is called a difference of two squares. It's actually the easiest factoring method because you have very little work to do. Alright, so let me show you what it looks like. So now that would be an expression that I would ask you to factor. Notice that it looks different from the other ones that we've done. This one only has two terms. The first term is a perfect square. The second term is a perfect square, and there's a minus in the middle. So this is called a difference of two squares because perfect square, and there's your difference. Super simple to factor. I get an x plus 3 and an x minus 3. So one of the factors will be positive, and one, so there's my little, one of the factors will be negative. This only works when I have two terms, so a binomial, and each of the terms is a perfect square. Alright, so let's do several examples, and these are pretty quick and easy because there's not much to do. Notice that the 3 is the square root of 9, and x is the square root of x squared. Alright, so let's do several examples. And again, we're almost done. So it's very quick and easy. So if I had x squared minus 36 and I told you to factor. Okay? X squared is a perfect term. 36 is a perfect square. Its square root is 6. One factor has to be positive, one factor has to be negative, and so this is x plus 6 and x minus 6. And then I would be done. Really, really fast. It's so nice. Alright, so here's our next example. 9x squared minus 4, and I want you to factor. So your job, two terms. This is a perfect square. The square root is 3x. 4 is a perfect square. The square root is 2. Positive, negative. So I'm going to get 3x plus 2 and 3x minus 2. And then it's done. So fast. Alright, here's your next example. What if I had 18x squared minus 2 and I ask you to factor? Well, that one looks a little different. Is 18 a perfect square? No. Is 2 a perfect square? No. But I could factor out a 2 first. So let's take out a 2 first, and then I get 9x squared minus 1. 9x squared is a perfect square. Its square root is 3, and then an x, and 1 is a perfect square, and its square root is 1. So the 2 carries forward, so this is going to be 3x plus 1 and 3x minus 1. It doesn't matter what order you write your factors. My idiosyncrasy is I usually write the positive one first. I always do my math the same way because I make less mistakes. Alright, so let's do yet another example. So let's do this one. I have 3x squared is equal to 48, and I want to factor. Again, this one looks a little bit different. So you're going to want to start by taking the 48, taking this number over to the left-hand side, by subtracting a 48 from both sides. Okay, so I'm going to get 3x squared minus 48 is equal to 0. Okay, now I want to factor these two. I'm tempted to think it's a difference of 2 squares, but it's not a perfect square, not a perfect square, but it might be if I take out the 3. So I'm going to factor out a 3, and then I'm going to get x squared minus 16 is equal to 0. I can now divide this side of the equation by 3 and this side of the equation by 3. Okay, because it looks a little bit different since it's an equation. Okay, 3 divided by 3, those two cancel. 0 divided by 3 is going to give me 0, so now I have x squared minus 16 is 0. Now it's a perfect square, and I'll get x plus 4 and x minus 4 is equal to 0, and then we'll do more with this later in a couple of days. Alright, we are virtually done. This was a very short lesson, which is nice. Here is your second problem. So once I get it recorded for you, then you're going to pause the video and do your second problem. It says to factor, and you have two problems. A is going to be x squared minus 25, and B is 2x squared is equal to 512. So those are your two problems. And your lecture is done. It was a very nice short lecture. Good luck with your problems.